The rise and collapse of the Third Reich. In 1918, Germany was a defeated empire in ruins. By 1939, it was an aggressive dictatorship threatening the entire world. And by 1945, it lay in ashes, its cities destroyed, its leader dead, and its crimes exposed. This is the story of how the Third Reich rose from the chaos of post-World War I Germany, built a horrifying regime, plunged the world into war, and then collapsed under the weight of its own brutality and ambition. The story begins not with Adolf Hitler, but with the end of World War I. In November 1918, Germany signed an armistice with the Allies. The mighty German Empire collapsed, the Kaiser fled into exile, and a new democratic government, the Weimar Republic, was proclaimed. But this new democracy was born under terrible conditions. Germany had lost the war. The Treaty of Versailles demanded harsh terms, large territorial losses, military restrictions, and most importantly, heavy reparations payments that many Germans saw as crippling and humiliating. Many citizens felt betrayed. A poisonous myth spread that Germany hadn't truly been defeated on the battlefield, but had been stabbed in the back by internal enemies, Democrats, socialists, and, in anti-Semitic fantasies, Jews. The 1920s were turbulent. Germany faced hyperinflation when prices rose so fast that wages became worthless within days or even hours. Middle-class savings vanished overnight. Political violence filled the streets as communists and far-right militias clashed. Out of this chaos stepped a small, radical group, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party. Its leader, a failed art student and former soldier named Adolf Hitler, was a charismatic speaker with a fanatical ideology. He promised to reject Versailles, to restore German greatness, to unify all ethnic Germans under one state, and to rid Germany of supposed internal enemies, especially Jews, whom he blamed for both capitalism and communism, for defeat in war, and for the decadence of modern culture. In 1923, Hitler tried to seize power in a failed coup in Munich, known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He was arrested and briefly imprisoned. Many thought his political career was over. Instead, he used his trial as a propaganda platform, posing as a patriot, standing up to a corrupt system. In prison, he dictated a book, Mein Kampf, laying out his ideology: racial hierarchy, anti-Semitism, and the quest for Lebensraum, or living space, in Eastern Europe. When he was released, Hitler changed tactics. He decided to take power through legal means: elections, propaganda, and appeals to fear and resentment. For a time, it seemed like Germany was stabilizing. By the mid-1920s, the economy improved, and extremist parties lost traction. But then came 1929. The Great Depression devastated economies worldwide. In Germany, banks failed, businesses closed, and unemployment soared. Millions were desperate, angry, and disillusioned with the existing political parties. The Nazis exploited this crisis masterfully. They promised jobs, order, national pride, and a strong leader who would cut through the chaos. By 1932, the Nazi Party had become one of the largest parties in the German parliament, the Reichstag. On January 30th, 1933, conservative elites, believing they could control him and use his popularity, persuaded President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. They thought he would be a tool. Instead, he became the master. Hitler wasted no time in dismantling democracy. In February 1933, A fire broke out in the Reichstag building. The Nazis blamed the blaze on communists and used it as an excuse to suspend civil liberties. Through emergency decrees, they allowed the state to arrest political opponents without due process. Weeks later, the Enabling Act passed, allowing Hitler's government to rule by decree, bypassing parliament entirely. The Weimar Republic still existed on paper, but in reality, democracy was dead. The Nazis moved quickly to consolidate power. All rival political parties were banned. Trade unions were dissolved, and workers placed under Nazi-controlled organizations. Local state governments were brought under central control. The police and courts were reshaped to serve the regime. Behind the scenes, a new instrument of terror grew: the SS and its secret police arm, the Gestapo. They arrested, tortured, and murdered political opponents, often without trial. At the same time, the regime built a powerful propaganda machine. Under Joseph Goebbels, the Nazis controlled radio, newspapers, film, and education. Posters, rallies, and carefully staged events created an image of unity and strength. Children were drawn into the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls, where they were taught loyalty to Hitler and indoctrinated with racist and militaristic ideas. From the very beginning, the Nazi state was built on racism and anti-Semitism. Within months of taking power, the regime began to boycott Jewish businesses, to purge Jews from government jobs, universities, and cultural life, and to encourage violence against them. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws redefined who was considered German and who was Jewish, not based on religion, but on so-called blood. Jews were stripped of citizenship, barred from many professions, and forbidden from marrying or having relations with Aryan Germans. Germany became a racial dictatorship, where rights depended on one's supposed racial status. But Hitler's ambitions didn't stop at transforming German society. He aimed to remake Europe. In 1936, German troops marched into the Rhineland, a region that under Versailles was supposed to remain demilitarized. France and Britain protested, but did nothing. Hitler concluded that the Allies were weak and unwilling to fight. In 1938, he turned toward Austria. Through a mixture of pressure, threats, and local support from Austrian Nazis, Germany annexed Austria in the Anschluss. Again, there was no real resistance from Western powers. Later that year, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large ethnic German population. Britain and France, desperate to avoid war, agreed at the Munich conference to let Germany take it, believing this concession would satisfy Hitler. It did not. Meanwhile, anti-Semitic persecution intensified. On the night of November 9-10, 1938, Nazi leaders organized a nationwide pogrom. Synagogues were burned, Jewish shops smashed, and thousands of Jews arrested. This event became known as Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. It was a turning point, a signal that violence against Jews had become official state policy. By 1939, Hitler was ready for war. On September 1, 1939, German forces invaded Poland using a staged border incident as a pretext. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. The German military, the Wehrmacht, unleashed a new style of warfare that came to be known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Combining fast-moving tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry, German forces overran Poland in weeks. Behind the front lines, special SS units called Einsatzgruppen began systematic mass shootings of Polish elites, and Jewish communities. The war was brutal from the outset. In the spring of 1940, Hitler turned west. Within months, German forces conquered Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. British forces barely escaped at Dunkirk, leaving most of their equipment behind. By June 1940, most of Western Europe was under German occupation or allied to the regime. Hitler now stood as the master of the European continent, at least for the moment. But one opponent refused to yield: Britain. In the summer and autumn of 1940, the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, launched a campaign to destroy the Royal Air Force and break British resistance. Cities such as London endured heavy bombing in what became known as the Blitz. Despite immense destruction and loss of life, Britain held out, aided by new technologies like radar and by sheer determination. Failing to force Britain to surrender, Hitler turned to his ultimate ideological enemy, the Soviet Union. On June the 22nd, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union with millions of soldiers and thousands of tanks and aircraft. It was the largest land invasion in history. Hitler framed it as a war of annihilation, targeting not just the Soviet state, but the peoples he regarded as racially or politically inferior: Jews, Slavs, and Communists. As German troops advanced deep into Soviet territory, the Einsatzgruppen followed, conducting mass shootings of Jewish men, women, and children. Entire communities were wiped out in ravines and forests. This phase marked a crucial escalation on the path to what would become known as the Holocaust. The invasion of the Soviet Union changed everything. The war became more brutal, more ideological, and more genocidal. In late 1941, after months of mass shootings, the Nazi leadership moved toward an even more systematic method of murder. Jews from across Europe were forced into ghettos, deported in trains, and sent to extermination camps in occupied Poland. Places like Chełmno, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. There, many were killed in gas chambers, their bodies burned in mass crematoria. Others were worked to death as slave laborers under horrific conditions. By 1942, the Nazis had begun what they called the final solution to the Jewish question, the attempt to murder all Jews in Europe. The Holocaust would claim 6 million Jewish lives, along with millions of other victims: Roma and Sinti, disabled people, Polish and Soviet civilians, prisoners of war, and those persecuted for political beliefs, religion, or sexual orientation. The Third Reich wasn't just a military dictatorship. It was a genocidal state. Yet even as these crimes were committed, the military tide was beginning to turn. In December 1941, Germany's advance on Moscow stalled in the brutal Russian winter. At roughly the same time, Germany's ally Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in the United States. The following days, Hitler declared war on the United States, adding another powerful enemy to Germany's list. From 1942 onward, Germany faced a global coalition: Britain and the Commonwealth, the Soviet Union, and the United States. The war that Nazi leaders had believed would be quick and decisive became a grinding multi-front struggle that the German economy and military could not sustain forever. The year 1942 marked the beginning of major German defeats. In North Africa, German and Italian forces under General Erwin Rommel were pushed back by British and Allied troops, eventually surrendering in 1943. In the east, the decisive turning point came at the Battle of Stalingrad. From the summer of 1942 to February 1943, German and Soviet forces fought a savage battle for control of the city. Street by street, building by building, both sides suffered enormous casualties. When the surrounded German Sixth Army finally surrendered, it was a catastrophic defeat. The aura of German invincibility was shattered. Meanwhile, Allied bombing campaigns intensified. American and British aircraft targeted German factories, railways, oil facilities and cities, aiming to cripple the war economy and break civilian morale. German cities like Hamburg, Cologne, and later Dresden suffered devastating firebombing. Civilians died in large numbers, and housing, infrastructure, and industry were destroyed. On the home front, shortages of food and materials grew. Yet the Nazi leadership insisted on continuing the war, even as the odds turned against them. In July 1943, Allied forces landed in Sicily, and soon after, Italy's fascist regime collapsed. Italy surrendered and eventually joined the Allies. Germany was forced to occupy much of Italy and divert forces from other fronts. In the east, the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943 was the largest tank battle in history. The Soviets not only held their ground, but began a relentless push westward, driving the German army back toward its own borders. By 1944, the Third Reich was on the defensive everywhere. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy in northern France. D-Day. American, British, Canadian, and other Allied troops established a foothold in Western Europe. From there, they broke through German defenses and began liberating France and the Low Countries. To the east, the Red Army launched massive offensives that destroyed large portions of the German army and liberated much of Eastern Europe. The Reich was now being squeezed from both sides. Inside Germany, some members of the military and conservative elite concluded that Hitler was leading the country to total ruin. On July 20, 1944, a group of officers attempted to assassinate Hitler with a bomb at his eastern headquarters. The explosion killed several people, but failed to kill Hitler. In response, the regime unleashed a wave of brutal reprisals. Thousands were arrested, tortured, and executed. The chance to change course from within had failed. As Allied armies advanced, they began to liberate concentration camps. What they found shocked even hardened soldiers: starving prisoners, mass graves, and evidence of industrialized killing. The full scale of Nazi crimes was not yet understood, but it was clear that something uniquely horrifying had taken place. By early 1945, the Reich was collapsing. In the west, Allied forces crossed the Rhine into Germany. In the east, the Red Army closed in on Berlin. German cities lay in ruins, refugees flooded the roads, and millions of civilians and soldiers were dead or missing. In his bunker beneath Berlin, Hitler raged against reality, issuing impossible orders to non-existent divisions. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet troops fought in the streets above, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. Within days, German resistance crumbled. On May 8, 1945, Germany signed an unconditional surrender. In Europe, the war was over. The Third Reich, which had promised a 1,000-year empire, had lasted just 12 years. The defeat of the Third Reich left Europe devastated. Tens of millions had died in combat, bombings, massacres, and genocides. Entire cities and regions lay in ruins. Millions were displaced, homeless, or stateless. At the Nuremberg trials, leading Nazi officials were charged with war crimes, crimes against peace, and crimes against humanity. For the first time, an international tribunal declared that individuals, not just states, were responsible for such acts. Some were executed. Others received long prison terms. Many more perpetrators, however, escaped justice. For Germany, the collapse of the Third Reich meant both division and rebuilding. The country was split into occupation zones, which evolved into West Germany and East Germany during the Cold War. Denazification programs attempted, imperfectly, to remove Nazi influence from public life. Over decades, Germans wrestled with questions of guilt, responsibility, and memory. The legacy of the Third Reich is one of warning. It shows how a democratic system, weakened by economic crisis, social division, and loss of faith in institutions, can be undermined from within. It shows how propaganda, conspiracy theories, racism, and scapegoating can pave the way for the destruction of human rights and the rule of law. It shows how ordinary people, through fear, indifference, or active support, can become complicit in immense crimes. But it also shows that such regimes, built on violence, lies, and hatred, contain the seeds of their own destruction. The Third Reich rose quickly, fueled by resentment and fanaticism. It fell just as catastrophically, overwhelmed by the combined strength of the nations it had attacked and undone by its own radical goals. The ruins it left behind remind us of the cost of dictatorship and war, and of the absolute necessity of defending democracy, human rights, and the dignity of every person. The rise and collapse of the Third Reich is more than a chapter in history. It is a warning from the past. As the last survivors and witnesses grow fewer, it falls to us to remember how fragile freedom can be, how deadly hatred can become, and how essential it is to stand against injustice before it is too late. Only by understanding how such a regime came to power, what it did, and why it failed, can we work to ensure that nothing like it ever rises again.